Every Saturday morning, right around the hour when second bell was at its busiest, the gray and white stray appeared. Not for the sausage links sitting on the counter near the register. Not for the wicker basket of pet biscuits that the neighborhood children liked to sneak to strays when their mothers weren't looking. The cat had no interest in any of that. It would slip through the gap beneath the propped-open side door, move with quiet, deliberate steps across the worn hardwood floor, and jump up onto the old pine shelving unit near the back wall. Then it would bite down on exactly one small stuffed rabbit, cream-colored, pink-eared, soft with age, and vanish back through the gap before anyone could reach it. The first time it happened, Marlene Brooks almost laughed. The second time, she felt a flicker of genuine irritation. By the fourth Saturday in a row, standing at the toy shelf and staring into the near-empty bin, she stopped laughing entirely. Marlene was 58 years old. She had run Second Bell, a second-hand shop on the quieter end of Caldwell Street, in the small town of Heron Falls, Oregon, for going on 14 years, the last 3 of those alone. The store smelled the way all good thrift shops smell, like cedar and old paper, and something faintly floral from the used linens folded near the window. She sold furniture with character, framed prints, vintage coats with functioning buttons, and in a corner near the radiator, a carefully sorted collection of children's toys that had been washed and dried and made presentable again. Nothing in that corner cost more than a few dollars. The stuffed animals, in particular, were practically given away. The cat itself was not remarkable to look at gray-white fur, one ear slightly nicked at the tip, ribs visible if the light hit it right, eyes the pale yellow-green of old glass. It wasn't feral in the way of animals that have never known a human touch. It had simply decided that humans were optional. It did not beg. It did not rub against ankles or perform any of the small negotiations that stray cats typically use to secure goodwill. It watched, from the sidewalk, from the brick wall behind the alley, from the low branch of the elm tree across the street. It watched the shop with a steadiness that was almost unnerving, and every Saturday, without fail, it came inside and took what it came for. What unsettled Marlene most was not the theft itself, but the specificity of it. The cat ignored the cloth mice, the rubber squeeze toys, the stuffed bears and the fabric dolls. Every single time, it selected a small, soft rabbit. She began to notice that the rabbits it chose all shared a quality small enough to be carried cleanly in a cat's mouth, worn enough to be deeply soft, the kind of toy a young child would press against a cheek at night. That was not random. Marlene could not explain how she knew this, but she knew it the same way she knew when a piece of furniture had once been loved rather than merely used. There was a logic to it she couldn't yet name. Her part-time assistant, Toby, was 23 and found the whole situation delightful. He called the cat the shoplifter and suggested they put up a sign. Marlene did not find this funny, but she let him pull up the grainy footage from the shop's aging security camera anyway. They watched it together on a Tuesday afternoon, leaning over the counter with coffee going cold beside them. The timestamps confirmed what Marlene had already suspected. The cat arrived on Saturdays, almost always within the same 2-hour window in the morning. It never lingered. It never browsed. It came with a purpose, executed it, and left. "Maybe it's got kittens somewhere," Toby said. "Nesting instinct, bringing soft things back to the litter." It was a reasonable theory. A regular customer named June, who was 70 and came in most weeks to look at the vintage brooches, offered the same guess with a warm smile when Marlene mentioned it to her. But Toby himself was the one who poked the first hole in it, rewinding the footage a second time and pointing at the screen. The cat always carried the rabbit the same way, gripped at the back of the neck, the toy held level, kept off the ground. It moved carefully. The rabbit arrived wherever it was going in the same condition it left the shelf. "If it's for a nest," Toby said slowly, "why does it care whether the thing gets dirty?" Marlene didn't answer. She went to the back to check her inventory log, tracing through the donation records for the toy bin. The stuffed rabbits had come in across multiple separate donations, different families, different months, no connection between them. The only thing they shared was their character. Small, soft, well-loved, the kind of toy made for sleeping with. She put a bowl of food on the front step that evening. The cat was on the back wall, watching. It did not come near the bowl. It simply looked at her with those pale green eyes. patient and unhurried, and then looked away. That was when Marlene began to understand that something was waiting at the other end of these weekly trips. She did not know what, but she felt it the way you feel a word on the edge of memory, shapeless and insistent and impossible to dismiss. Marlene Brooks was not, by nature, a woman who believed in signs. 3 years earlier, her husband David had died of heart failure on a Tuesday in February, and the experience of that loss had quietly calcified something inside her. Not bitterness, she was not bitter, but a kind of resolute skepticism toward the idea that things happened for reasons, that animals carried meaning, that coincidence was anything more than coincidence. She and David had built Second Bell together, and after he was gone, she kept it running the way you keep a car running, when you aren't sure you want to drive anywhere. Out of habit, out of the memory of purpose, out of a refusal to let the last living piece of a shared life go dark. Her daughter lived in Portland and called every Sunday. They spoke about small, safe things, the store, the weather, a recipe. Marlene's sister had stopped suggesting grief counseling some months ago, and the silence around the subject had settled into the family like old furniture present, unremarked upon, simply there. Marlene was fine. She told people she was fine, and on most days, she believed it. What she did not examine too closely was the way she moved through the shop like a caretaker rather than an owner, maintaining, not inhabiting. So when she decided to follow the cat the next Saturday, she told herself it was about the inventory, about the principle of the thing. She was not, she insisted to Toby, as she pulled on her old rain jacket, doing anything sentimental. Toby said, "Sure," and went back to tagging coat hangers. She had placed the nicest rabbit in the bin that week, cleaner than the others. One ear recently resewn, the softest of the lot. She watched from near the curtained dressing alcove as the cat came in, moved to the shelf, and paused before the 3 available options. It took the best one, not the nearest, not the easiest to grab, the best one. Marlene felt something shift in her chest as she watched it go. A cat with no agenda takes the nearest thing. This one was shopping for someone. She let it get a half block ahead before she followed. It was a gray Saturday morning, the kind that promises light rain and delivers it gently, more mist than drizzle. Marlene kept to the opposite side of the street at first, then fell into a careful trail as the cat turned off the main road. It moved through the neighborhood with the efficiency of an animal that had made this trip many times. It threaded through the alley behind the hardware store, crossed the empty parking lot behind St. Crispin's Church at a trot, ducked under a chain-link fence, and emerged onto the service road that ran along the edge of town toward the old Pineview RV lot. The lot had been a going concern once, back when the cannery was still open and seasonal workers needed somewhere to stay. Now it held a dozen vehicles in various states of retirement, most of them clearly uninhabited windows, opaque with grime, tires flat, awnings collapsed. The cat moved through them without hesitation and stopped in front of a white-paneled RV at the far end of the row. Its original color faded to the pale yellow of old paper. The curtains inside were drawn. A small cinder block served as a front step. The cat sniffed along the bottom edge of the door, found a gap just wide enough, and pushed through. Marlene stood in the mist and waited. A few seconds passed. Then, from inside the RV, she heard a sound that stopped her completely, a child's laughter, quiet and brief, the kind that comes from genuine surprise, not the laughter of a child watching a screen or being chased in a yard. The laughter of a child who has just been given something unexpected and good. She stood for a long moment, with the rain barely touching her shoulders, her heart doing something complicated and quiet inside her. She had not come prepared for this. She did not knock immediately. She stood at the side of the RV and looked through the narrow gap between the drawn curtain and the window frame, and what she saw arranged itself in her memory like a photograph she would keep for a long time. A little girl, perhaps 6 years old, thin, with brown hair pulled into an uneven ponytail, was sitting on a folded blanket on the narrow bed. She was holding the rabbit Marlene had put out that morning, turning it over in her hands, examining its ears with the concentrated attention of a child who takes stuffed animals seriously. Beside her, perched on the armrest of a small chair that had once been bolted to a wall, sat the cat already settling in, tail curling around its paws, its errand complete. and in the narrow space between the kitchenette and the bed stood a man in his early 30s, lean and tired in the particular way of someone who has been running on determination rather than rest. He reached over and gently straightened the rabbit's ear that the girl had bent examining it, and said something low that Marlene couldn't hear through the window. The girl smiled up at him, a real smile, wide and unguarded, and leaned against his arm. The inside of the RV was orderly in the way that very small spaces are orderly when the people inside them are trying to make dignity out of very little. The blankets were folded precisely. A row of colorful drawings was taped along the upper wall, sun and house, and a figure with orange hair that was probably the girl herself. A small shelf held a row of amber prescription bottles and a library book and a box of crayons. On the bed beside the girl, arranged with clear intention, was a line of stuffed rabbits. Each one had a small ribbon tied around its neck, each ribbon a different color. Marlene stepped back and accidentally put her foot down on a fallen branch. The crack was not loud, but it was enough. The man was at the door in seconds, pushing it open and stepping down onto the cinder block with his shoulders squared and his eyes sharp. He looked at Marlene the way people look at strangers who have appeared uninvited in the one place they cannot afford to lose. Not angry, not frightened, but very still. His name, she learned in the uncomfortable minutes that followed, was Ethan Cole. The girl inside was his daughter, Lily. The cat on the chair was, apparently, named Patch, and had been coming and going through the gap in the door for the better part of 2 months. Marlene held up one of the old receipts from her pocket she had thought to bring proof, some instinct for order asserting itself, and said quietly that she believed his cat had been visiting her store. Ethan looked at the rabbit in Lily's hands through the open door. His jaw tightened, and something in his expression moved through embarrassment and arrived at a kind of exhausted honesty. He said he knew. He said he was sorry. He said it wouldn't happen again. He reached for his wallet, and Marlene put her hand up. "I didn't come for that," she said. A silence settled between them. The rain continued its light work on the rooftop of the RV. Ethan said that Patch had found them on his own, early in the fall. Lily had started leaving him bits of bread, and then crackers. And then eventually the cat had decided the RV was worth his professional consideration. He had been coming and going for weeks before the first rabbit appeared. Ethan had tried to keep him in, to prevent whatever was happening, but the cat would wait at the gap in the door with an expression of supreme patience until someone's attention slipped, and then he would be gone and back within the hour, with a toy held carefully in his teeth. "I should have come to you," Ethan said. He said it flatly, without decoration, the admission of a man who has run the calculus on his own pride enough times to know exactly where it has cost him. "Why didn't you?" Marlene asked. He looked at Lily through the doorway. The girl was smoothing the rabbit's ears, oblivious to the conversation, adding the new one to the end of her line with the focused ceremony of a child who has created a private ritual. Ethan Cole had been a construction foreman in a mid-sized town 2 hours north. His wife, Nora, had died 8 months earlier from pancreatic cancer that had moved faster than the doctors had expected. She had been 31 years old. Before she got sick, Nora had a habit, a small, consistent kindness, that had become one of the rhythms of their family life. She loved second-hand shops. She would buy old stuffed animals, wash them carefully, mend any tears, and give one to Lily every Saturday morning. A ritual she had invented without ceremony. She told Lily that rabbits always knew the way home, and so a stuffed rabbit was the best thing to keep close when you wanted to feel safe. After Nora died, Ethan lost his footing in increments. He took too much time off, and the company replaced him. The rent on their apartment in a town with too many memories became impossible, and his uncle offered the use of an old RV that was sitting idle on the Pineview lot. It was supposed to be temporary. Most things that become permanent begin as temporary. He tried to keep the Saturday mornings. He tried to keep the rabbits. Some weeks he managed at a thrift store, a yard sale, a dollar bin at a closing shop. Some weeks he couldn't. The gas was low, or the money was gone, or the nearest town with a shop was farther than he could drive. Then one morning in October, Patch had come through the door with a small, cream-colored rabbit held carefully in his teeth, and set it down in front of Lily with the air of an entity that has fulfilled a contract. Lily had held it for a long time without speaking. Then she had laughed the same brief, genuine laugh that Marlene had heard through the wall of the RV, and said that Mama must have told Patch to remember. Ethan had not corrected her. He had tried to stop it. He genuinely had. He had blocked the gap in the door with a folded towel. Patch had moved the towel. He had tried keeping Patch inside all day on Fridays, thinking that would break the pattern. Patch had simply sat by the door with his pale eyes fixed on the gap and waited, with a patience that made Ethan feel vaguely ashamed of his own impatience. Every Saturday, the cat went out and came back with a rabbit, clean and intact, held at the neck so it didn't drag. Lily believed it was a miracle. Small, weekly, reliable. The best kind. Ethan had let the miracle continue for as long as it could. Standing in the thin rain outside the RV, listening to this man speak in the careful sentences of someone who has rehearsed self-sufficiency until it has become a reflex, Marlene felt something give way in her chest that had been sealed for a long time. She looked through the open door at Lily, who had finished arranging the rabbits and was now tying a piece of bright yarn around the newest one's neck, her tongue pressed between her teeth in concentration. Marlene looked at the row of small stuffed animals on the bed, each one a Saturday that Ethan had somehow found a way to keep. She thought about the cardboard box in the back of her own store, the one she had not opened in 3 years, the box with David's good wool scarf, the reading glasses he had left on the counter the morning he died, the small stuffed bear she had bought as a gift for her future grandchild 2 Christmases ago, and never been able to give because it reminded her of what the future had once felt like when she was still building it with someone. She had put the box away because the weight of it was more than she could carry every day. She understood now, with sudden and uncomfortable clarity, that Ethan Cole was trying not to put the box away. He was carrying it forward one Saturday at a time, even when it cost him, because a little girl was still inside the belief that Saturdays meant something, and he was not yet ready to let her stop believing that. Marlene drove back to Second Bell in the rain without speaking, even though she was alone. She went straight to the storage room, found the cardboard box, and sat down on the floor beside it for a long time. When she finally opened it and held David's wool scarf between her hands, she allowed herself to do something she had not permitted in 3 years. She cried. Not the quiet, managed kind, but the kind that has been waiting at a locked door, and that moves through you like weather when the door finally opens. Toby found her later, composed and slightly red around the eyes, making a very precise inventory of the toy corner. She told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him, and when she finished, he was quiet for almost a full minute. "We should help them," he said. "We will," Marlene said, "but not the way you're thinking." She had seen the way Ethan's spine had gone rigid when he reached for his wallet. She had recognized the particular pride of a person who has accepted too little and is guarding what remains of their self-regard with both hands. Charity offered plainly would close the door. She needed a door that opened from both sides. She thought about it for 2 days. The following Tuesday, she prepared a small wooden crate. Inside it, she placed 3 soft rabbits, freshly washed, a card of ribbon in 4 colors, a needle and a spool of heavy thread, and a handwritten note on a piece of cardstock she had cut from an old gift bag. Looking for someone who can repair stuffed animals and soft toys for the shop's resale corner. Will pay per item. No experience required, just careful hands. She drove to the Pineview lot that evening and left the crate on the cinder block step. Patch was sitting on the roof of the RV, watching her with calm authority. "Your work is done," Marlene told him. The cat blinked once, which she chose to interpret as acknowledgement. Ethan came by Second Bell 2 days later. He stood at the counter with his hands in his jacket pockets and said he understood what she was doing. He said it without accusation, more like a man confirming a direction on a map. Marlene said she needed the work done, and she would pay a fair rate. She said it simply, without elaboration, and moved on to showing him the first batch of toys to be repaired. He had careful hands. She noticed that immediately. He stitched the torn seam of a bear with the clean efficiency of someone who has mended things out of necessity rather than craft, and the result was neat and invisible and good. She brought him more. A week later, she asked if he could repaint a wooden shelf that had gone gray, and he did it in an afternoon. She added small jobs, a latch on the front door that had been stiff for months, a drawer runner that needed replacing, a section of baseboard that had come away from the wall. She paid him properly for each one. Toby began bringing extra food at closing time, packaged neatly in containers that he labeled day-end surplus, please use. If Ethan recognized the fiction, he accepted it without comment. Lily started coming with her father on weekends. She was small and watchful at first, staying near the door, but she warmed incrementally the way children do when they sense they are genuinely welcome rather than merely tolerated. She discovered that she could help sort ribbons by color and that she was extremely good at tying neat bows around stuffed animals' necks. She helped Marlene print small tags with a little rubber stamp. She drew a sign on cardboard in 4 colors that read, "Rescued Toys Corner" in large, decisive letters, and Marlene framed it and hung it above the shelf. The corner, it turned out, sold exceptionally well. There was something about the mended toys visibly cared for, imperfectly restored, each one carrying the evidence of someone's careful attention that made people want to handle them. Customers who came in for furniture left with a stuffed rabbit under one arm. Marlene raised the price slightly, and they still sold. Patch, who had been the architect of this entire arrangement without being consulted on any of it, took to sleeping on the window ledge inside the store on Saturday mornings. He had stopped making his weekly acquisitions. There was no longer any need. The supply chain he had established through persistence and impeccable selection had been formalized into something sustainable, and he appeared to regard this development with the quiet satisfaction of a professional whose methods have finally been adopted by management. Ethan began to stand differently. It was a small thing, not the kind of change you could point to in a single moment. But over weeks, Marlene noticed that he no longer held his shoulders at the defensive angle she had first seen in the RV doorway. He made eye contact more easily. He asked questions about how the shop worked, with the alertness of someone cataloging information for later use. He told her once, briefly, that a machine shop outside town had offered him a part-time position after he had helped a neighbor fix a generator. He said he thought it might become full-time. Lily, in the way of children who have been frightened and are slowly discovering that the fear was not permanent, bloomed. She had opinions about which toys were worth repairing and which had passed the point of dignity. She developed a filing system for the ribbon cards. She told a customer once, with complete authority, that the tan bear with the missing button eye was the best one, because you can see it's been through things. The customer bought it immediately. Winter passed without drama. The RV lot grew quiet with ice. Marlene took to leaving an extra key on the hook inside the store, and when the temperature dropped below 20 degrees, Ethan and Lily came and went through the back without ceremony, using the small break room to warm up between tasks, and neither of them made anything of it, which was the only way it could have worked. Patch slept through most of February on a folded quilt near the radiator, getting up only for meals and the occasional stroll along the windowsill to confirm that the street outside remained as he had left it. Spring came in the tentative way it comes to small Oregon towns, a few warm days interrupted by cold crocuses in the mud, the smell of wood smoke thinning from the air. On the first real Saturday of the season, Marlene opened second bell early. The morning was clear and cold, and the light through the front window fell in long yellow strips across the wooden floor. Patch appeared at 8 in the morning, right on time, walking up the front step with the proprietary ease of a cat who has decided a building belongs to him. He jumped onto his customary ledge, settled into his curl, and closed his eyes. 20 minutes later, a battered pickup truck pulled up to the curb. Ethan got out, better rested than Marlene had seen him, wearing a clean work jacket. Lily jumped down from the passenger side in a yellow coat that was slightly too large for her, and ran up the front steps holding something carefully in both hands. She set it on the counter. It was a small stuffed, rabbit cream-colored, pink-eared, that had been repaired with unusual care. New stitching along the seam, a tiny patch of soft fabric where the original had worn through, both ears even. Around its neck, a pale green ribbon tied in a precise bow. "Me and Dad fixed it," Lily said. "It's the first one we fixed by ourselves. We want to give it to your store." Marlene picked it up and held it in both hands. Ethan, standing in the doorway, told her that they had moved into a small apartment near the east end of town 2 weeks earlier. The machine shop had made the position permanent. He said it was a 2-bedroom with good windows, which Lily had decided was the most important feature. Lily was already at the rescued toys corner, examining the current inventory with a proprietor's eye. "You need more ribbons," she announced. "I'll order some," Marlene said. She put the rabbit on the shelf above the register, separate from the ones for sale. She did not put a price on it. Patch opened one eye from his place in the window, surveyed the morning for threats, found none, and went back to sleep. Outside on Caldwell Street, Heron Falls was doing what small towns do on early spring mornings, moving through its routines slowly and without urgency, the light making everything look briefly like it had been cleaned. A woman walked a dog. A man brought in a delivery. 2 children chased a bottle cap down the sidewalk. And in the window of a second-hand shop between the post office and the hardware store, a gray and white cat lay curled in the sun, his work entirely done, in a building where something that had been broken for a long time was deciding, quietly and without announcement, that it was ready to be whole again. Above the corner shelf, Lily's cardboard sign had been replaced by a small piece of painted wood. White letters on dark green. 2 words. Asterisk. Second chance. Asterisk. And every Saturday after that, Patch came back, not to take anything, just to be there on the warm ledge, in the particular square of morning light that fell across the windowsill of a store where, because of a stray cat and a stolen rabbit, and the stubborn kindness of people who had each decided, in their own way, not to let love become something that only lived in the past, the door was always open.